I stared at the appraiser's face as all the color drained from it. She set the painting down on her desk like it might explode, then looked at me with wide eyes. "Mr. Harrison, I need to make a phone call. Would you mind waiting here for just a moment?" My hands were shaking. I'd almost thrown this thing in the dumpster 3 days ago. Let me back up. My Aunt Margaret died 2 months ago. She was my dad's older sister, 78 years old, lived alone in the same rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn she'd had since 1972. My entire life, she was the family embarrassment. Never married, no kids, worked as a clerk at the public library until she retired. She collected stray cats, wore the same 3 dresses rotated throughout the week, and her apartment always smelled like mothballs and old books. My mom used to make excuses not to visit her. "She's just so depressing," Mom would say. Living in that dark little apartment, surrounded by all that junk, it's like she gave up on life. My dad was worse. He'd spent his whole career climbing the corporate ladder, made partner at his law firm, lived in a house in Westchester that he loved showing off to his colleagues. His sister's modest lifestyle humiliated him. At family gatherings, he'd introduce her quickly and change the subject, like she was something to get past. But I loved Aunt Margaret. When I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, my parents would drop me off at her apartment on Saturday afternoons when they had social obligations. While other kids were at soccer practice or piano lessons, I was sitting in Aunt Margaret's cramped living room, surrounded by stacks of books and her 4 cats, listening to her read poetry. She never talked down to me. She'd make us grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles, pour us both ginger ale in actual wine glasses because every meal should feel a little special, and we discussed books like I was her colleague, not a child. "Logan," she'd say, "the world will try to convince you that success looks like a big house and an important title, but I'll tell you a secret. The richest people I know are rich in time, rich in curiosity, rich in wonder." Remember that, as I got older, I kept visiting her. Through middle school, high school, college. Every few weeks, I'd take the subway into Brooklyn, climb the 4 flights to her apartment, and we'd spend the afternoon together. She introduced me to Whitman, to Dickinson, to poets I'd never heard of. She taught me to really look at paintings, to see the brushstrokes and understand what the artist was feeling. "Art isn't about what something costs," she'd tell me. "It's about what it makes you feel, what it makes you think about." My parents thought it was weird that I kept visiting her. "You're 25 years old," my mom said once. "Don't you have friends your own age? Margaret is sweet, but she's limited. She never did anything with her life." I tried to argue, but Mom just patted my hand. "You're kind to spend time with her. She doesn't have anyone else." 3 years ago, I brought my girlfriend, Sarah, to meet Aunt Margaret. We'd been dating for 6 months, and I wanted her to meet the person who'd shaped so much of how I saw the world. Sarah loved her immediately. They talked about books for 2 hours while I made tea in Margaret's tiny kitchen, listening to them laugh together in the other room. When we left, Sarah squeezed my hand. "She's wonderful. Why does your family act like she's some kind of burden?" I didn't have a good answer. Last Thanksgiving was the last time I saw her healthy. My parents hosted, as usual, in their big dining room with the crystal chandelier. Margaret showed up in her best dress, which was still old-fashioned and a bit threadbare. She brought a pumpkin pie she'd made herself. My mom's smile was tight. "Oh, Margaret, you didn't have to do that. We have dessert catered." During dinner, my Uncle Mom's brother was talking loudly about his new Mercedes. "Fully loaded, top of the line. You have to treat yourself, you know? Life's too short to settle for less." He looked at Margaret. "Margaret, you still driving that old Honda? What is it, 20 years old now?" 23, Margaret said mildly. "Runs perfectly well." My uncle laughed. "You know, if you'd made different choices, invested in your career instead of hiding in a library, you could afford nice things too. It's never too late to want more out of life." The table got quiet. My dad looked down at his plate. My mom suddenly became very interested in passing the gravy. Margaret just smiled. "I have everything I need, thank you." After dinner, I found her in the kitchen, washing dishes even though my parents had told her not to bother. "Aunt Margaret, I'm sorry about Uncle Dennis. He's an ass." She laughed, drying a plate. "Oh, Logan, I stopped caring what people like Dennis think decades ago. The tragedy isn't that he thinks I'm poor. The tragedy is that he thinks he's rich." "What do you mean?" She set down the dish towel and looked at me. "Your uncle has money, but he's bankrupt in every way that matters. He doesn't read, he doesn't create, He doesn't even really look at the world around him. He just accumulates and shows off and judges everyone else by his own sad little measuring stick. She took my hand. Promise me something, Logan. Promise me you'll never measure your life by someone else's standards. Live deliberately. Choose what matters to you. I promise. That was November. By February, she was in the hospital. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer moved fast. I visited her every day after work, sitting by her bed, reading to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself. My parents came once, stayed 20 minutes, looked uncomfortable the whole time. It's just so depressing, my mom said in the hallway. I can't stand hospitals. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding her hand. Her last words to me were, "The paintings, Logan. Promise me you'll look at the paintings." I thought she was confused from the medication. I will, Aunt Margaret. I promise. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Really look? Promise? I promise. She died an hour later. At the funeral, there were maybe 15 people. Some former co-workers from the library, a few neighbors, my family. My dad gave a brief eulogy that felt like he was reading someone else's words. My mom cried, but I think it was more about death in general than about Margaret specifically. Afterwards, my dad pulled me aside. Your aunt's apartment needs to be cleared out. The building wants it emptied by the end of the month. Your mother and I are too busy with the foundation gala, but if you could handle it. Yeah, I said. I'll take care of it. Just throw most of it out, Mom added. It's all junk, really. Old books. Those awful cats, they went to a shelter already. Thank God, and all those paintings she collected. Maybe keep anything that looks like it might have sentimental value, but honestly, Logan, she lived like a pauper. There's nothing of real worth there. The next Saturday, I took the subway to Brooklyn. Sarah came with me, brought boxes and garbage bags. Walking up those 4 flights of stairs, knowing Margaret wouldn't be there to open the door, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The apartment was exactly as I remembered it. Stacks of books everywhere, her reading chair by the window, the small kitchen where we'd made countless cups of tea, and the walls covered in paintings. Margaret had collected art her whole life. Not from galleries or auctions, but from street artists, estate sales, thrift stores. The paintings were everywhere. Different sizes, different styles, abstract pieces next to landscapes next to portraits. My family had always made fun of her junk art collection. Well, Sarah said softly, looking around. Where should we start? We spent hours sorting through Margaret's things. Her books, I couldn't throw them away. I boxed them up to donate to the library where she'd worked. Her clothes went to Goodwill. Her dishes, her furniture, her personal items. I tried to be systematic, but every object held a memory. Then there were the paintings. There must have been 40 of them throughout the apartment. Some framed, some just canvases stacked against walls. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at them, remembering her last words. The paintings, Logan. Really look. What are you thinking? Sarah asked. She wanted me to look at the paintings. Her last words to me. Sarah studied a large abstract piece above the sofa. They're beautiful. Your aunt had a good eye. My parents said to throw them out. Said, they're worthless. Are you going to? I thought about Uncle Dennis at Thanksgiving, about my mom calling Margaret's life depressing, about my dad being embarrassed by his own sister. I thought about Margaret making me grilled cheese and wine glasses, teaching me to see beauty everywhere, living exactly the life she chose. No, I said. I'm keeping them. We spent the rest of the day carefully taking down each painting, wrapping them in blankets, loading them into a rental van. The landlord had said I could have an extra week to clear everything out. I made 3 trips, filling my own apartment with Margaret's collection. My parents were not happy. Logan, what are you going to do with all that junk? My dad asked when I mentioned I'd taken the paintings. They're not junk. They meant something to Aunt Margaret. My mom sighed. Sweetheart, I know you loved her, but she had a hoarding problem. You can't keep every piece of garage sale art she accumulated. You don't have the space. I'll make space. That night, Sarah and I hung some of the paintings in my apartment. A beautiful landscape over the couch, a striking abstract in the hallway, a portrait of a woman in the bedroom. The apartment transformed, but there was one painting I kept coming back to. It had been in Margaret's bedroom, leaning against the wall behind her dresser, like she'd been protecting it. It was smaller than the others, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, an oil painting of a garden scene, vibrant colors, incredible brushwork. Something about it felt different from the others. I turned it over. On the back of the canvas, in Margaret's handwriting, estate sale, Bronx, $1,978, $75. The most beautiful thing I've ever owned. Sarah, look at this one. She studied it. It's gorgeous. The technique is remarkable. Does it seem, I don't know, different than the others? She looked closer. The quality is definitely higher. The brushwork is really sophisticated, and look at the signature in the corner. I looked where she was pointing. A small signature I'd almost missed. MC. Mean anything to you? She asked. No. But Margaret specifically kept this one separate, and her note says it was the most beautiful thing she owned. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop looking at that painting. I'd get up in the middle of the night, turn on the light, and just stare at it. There was something Margaret was trying to tell me. Finally, I took a photo and posted it on a Reddit forum about art, asking if anyone recognized the style or signature. Within an hour, someone responded, "That looks like it could be a Mary Cassatt, but that's impossible. If it's real, it would be worth millions. More likely a very good copy or student work. You should have it authenticated." Mary Cassatt. The name sounded vaguely familiar from an art history class I'd taken in college. I Googled her. American painter, 1844 to 1926. Impressionist. Famous for paintings of women and children. One of the only American artists to exhibit with the French Impressionists. Her paintings sold for millions at auction. My heart was racing. This couldn't be real, could it? I called Sarah. I think Margaret's painting might be something important. Define important. Like, millions of dollars important. Maybe. Silence. Then, Logan, are you serious? I don't know. I need to have it authenticated. There's an appraiser in Manhattan who specializes in Impressionist art. I made an appointment for tomorrow. Do you want me to come with you? No, I need to do this alone. For Margaret. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Margaret at that estate sale in the Bronx in 1978. Seeing this painting, spending $75, which was probably a significant amount for her budget because something about it spoke to her. She'd kept it for 44 years, never sold it, never even displayed it prominently, just kept it safe. The next morning, I wrapped the painting carefully and took the subway to the appraiser's office in Midtown. My hands were sweating the entire way. The appraiser was a woman in her 60s named Dr. Helen Morrison. Her office was professional, neat, walls covered with certificates and degrees. She greeted me warmly, but became very serious when I unwrapped the painting. She didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at it, then got out a magnifying glass and examined it inch by inch. She checked the back of the canvas, the frame, the signature. That's when her face went pale. "Mr. Harrison, I need to make a phone call. Would you mind waiting here for just a moment?" She left the room. I could hear her speaking in low, urgent tones in the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. She came back with another person, an older man she introduced as Dr. Richard Chen, director of the authentication department. They both examined the painting with various tools I didn't understand. Ultraviolet light, microscopes, chemical tests. They kept glancing at each other with looks I couldn't interpret. Finally, Dr. Morrison gestured to a chair. "Mr. Harrison, please sit down." I sat. My mouth was completely dry. "Where did you get this painting?" she asked. "It belonged to my aunt. She died 2 months ago. She bought it at an estate sale in the Bronx in 1978 for $75. Dr. Chen whistled softly. $75. What is it? I asked. Please just tell me. Dr. Morrison looked at her colleague, then back at me. Mr. Harrison, this is an authenticated Mary Cassatt. Original oil on canvas, circa 1892. Based on provenance research we just conducted, it was believed lost. It disappeared from a private collection in New York in the 1950s. The family assumed it was stolen or destroyed. The room tilted. How much? I mean, what's it worth? At auction? Conservatively, we'd estimate between $8 and $12 million. Possibly more, given that it's a previously lost work. I couldn't breathe. Million? Million, Dr. Morrison confirmed. Mr. Harrison, Your aunt owned a masterpiece. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Margaret, who my family pitied, who my mom called limited, who Uncle Dennis condescended to about her old car. Margaret had been sitting on an $8 million painting for 44 years. Are you all right? Dr. Chen asked. My family, I managed to say. My family told me to throw her paintings in the dumpster. They said it was all worthless junk. The appraisers exchanged glances. You didn't throw anything away, did you? Dr. Morrison asked carefully. No, I kept everything. I have 39 more paintings in my apartment. Mr. Harrison, she said slowly, if your aunt had an eye good enough to spot a lost cassette at an estate sale, there's a possibility some of the other works have value too. We should examine all of them. Over the next week, Dr. Morrison and her team came to my apartment and examined every single painting Margaret had collected. Most were exactly what they appeared to be: nice art from local artists, estate sale finds, thrift store pieces. Good quality, but not valuable. But there were 3 more surprises. A small landscape, bought at a garage sale in Queens in 1983, turned out to be an authentic child Hassam. Estimated value, $2 million. An abstract piece Margaret had purchased from a street artist in Soho in 1991 was authenticated as an early Jean-Michel Basquiat before he became famous. Estimated value, $5 million. And a portrait she'd bought at a church sale in Manhattan in 1995 was identified as a work by a lesser-known but highly collectible American painter from the 1930s. Estimated value, $400,000. Total value of Margaret's junk art collection, over $15 million. I sat on my floor, surrounded by paintings, and cried. Margaret had known. She must have known, or at least suspected. That's why she'd lived so modestly, in her rent-controlled apartment, driving her old car, wearing the same dresses. She wasn't poor. She was protecting her collection, keeping it safe, not drawing attention, and she'd left it all to me. I didn't tell my parents right away. I needed time to process, to understand what Margaret had done and why. Sarah came over that evening. I was still sitting on the floor. Logan, are you okay? I told her everything. The valuations, the total worth, the realization that Margaret had been wealthy beyond my family's comprehension while they pitied her. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to call my dad right now and tell him his pathetic sister was worth more than he'll make in 5 lifetimes. That her junk could buy his house 20 times over. But that's not what Margaret would want. She didn't live the way she did to prove anything to anyone. She lived that way because she valued different things. Sarah sat beside me. She wanted you to have these. She told you to look at the paintings. She knew, Logan. She knew what she was leaving you. The estate lawyer confirmed it 2 days later. Margaret's will was simple. Everything to Logan Harrison. The lawyer explained that Margaret had come to update her will 6 months before she got sick, specifically adding language about the paintings. She was very clear, the lawyer said. She wanted you to have them, to decide what to do with them. She said you were the only person who would understand. I decided to sell the cassette and the Hassam through auction. The Basquiat and the smaller pieces I kept, along with all of Margaret's non-valuable paintings. Some things aren't about money. The auction was in October, 7 months after Margaret died. The cassette sold for $13.2 million. The Hassam sold for $2.4 million. After fees and taxes, I cleared about $11 million. My parents found out when the sale made the news. A lost cassette discovered in Brooklyn apartment was apparently newsworthy. My dad called me, his voice tight. Logan, I saw the article. That painting was from Margaret's apartment. Yeah, Dad. Along with a few others. How much? The article said 13 million. 13.2, actually. Plus another 2.4 for a second piece. Silence. Then, that's... My God. Logan, Margaret was sitting on a fortune? She was. While you were all calling her pathetic and telling me to throw her things in the trash. More silence. I never said pathetic. You introduced her as your sister who never did much at your firm's Christmas party 5 years ago. I was there, Dad. Logan, do you know what she told me once? She said, the tragedy wasn't that Uncle Dennis thought she was poor. The tragedy was that he thought he was rich. What's that supposed to mean? It means she was richer than any of us in the ways that actually matter. She had time. She had curiosity. She had wonder. She had the ability to see beauty that everyone else walked past. She bought that cassette for $75 because she thought it was beautiful, not because she thought it was valuable. That's the difference between her and you. That's not fair, Logan, isn't it? You were embarrassed by her your whole life. Embarrassed that she didn't climb a corporate ladder, didn't have a fancy house, didn't impress your colleagues, and the whole time, she was wealthier than you could imagine. She just didn't need to show it off. I heard my mom's voice in the background, asking what was happening. Are you going to share any of this? My dad asked. With family? And there it was. The real question. I'm setting up a foundation in Aunt Margaret's name, I said. It's going to provide grants for public libraries, fund art education programs in schools, and help low-income families access museums and cultural institutions. Everything Margaret valued. That's very generous, Logan. But what about family? Your mother and I, your uncle, we could certainly use. Use what, Dad? You make 6 figures. You live in Westchester. Uncle Dennis drives a Mercedes. What exactly do any of you need? It's not about need. It's about what? Feeling entitled to money from a woman you all look down on? A woman whose funeral you barely attended, whose apartment you called depressing, whose life you dismissed as a waste? Logan, you're being unreasonable. I'm being exactly what Aunt Margaret taught me to be. I'm choosing what matters. And what matters isn't giving money to people who already have everything they need but still want more. What matters is honoring the person who actually earned this, who had the eye to see value where everyone else saw junk, who lived deliberately and on her own terms. You're making a mistake, my dad said. No, Dad. I'm making the first truly right decision of my life. I hung up. My mom called an hour later, then Uncle Dennis, then a cousin I barely knew, all wanting to talk about Margaret's estate and make sure everyone is taken care of fairly. I blocked their numbers. Sarah and I got married the next spring, a small ceremony, just close friends. We bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, 3 blocks from where Margaret had lived. We hung the basquiat in our living room, along with a dozen of Margaret's other paintings, the ones everyone had called junk. The Margaret Harrison Foundation launched that summer. In its first year, it gave grants to 43 libraries, funded art programs in 22 schools, and provided museum memberships to over 300 low-income families. I quit my job in finance and went back to school to get a degree in art history. It's what Margaret would have wanted. Sometimes I walk past the building where she lived. I look up at the windows of her old apartment and I think about her up there, surrounded by her paintings, her cats, her books, living a life everyone else thought was small. They were wrong. Her life was enormous. She saw things no one else could see. She valued things everyone else overlooked. She accumulated wealth in beautiful things and meaningful moments, not in status symbols and impressive titles. Last week, I was at an estate sale in Queens, and I found a small oil painting of a bridge, signed with initials I didn't recognize. The woman running the sale wanted $30 for it. Something about it caught my eye. The brushwork, the colors, the way the light hit the water. I bought it. I don't know if it's valuable. I don't care. It's beautiful, and that's enough. I hung it in my office, next to a photo of Aunt Margaret sitting in her reading chair, surrounded by her cats, holding a book, smiling at the camera. On the frame, I put a small plaque with words she said to me when I was 12 years old. The richest people are rich in time, rich in curiosity, rich in wonder. I understand now. I finally understand. Thank you, Aunt Margaret, for everything you taught me, for every Saturday afternoon, every conversation about poetry, every reminder that success isn't measured in dollars or titles or other people's approval, for showing me that the most valuable things in life are often the ones everyone else walks past, for the paintings, but more than that, for teaching me how to really see,